Today on Upfront, the battle over Wisconsin's right to work law. A judge calls it unconstitutional and strikes it down. Next, Wisconsin Attorney General Brad Schimel on efforts to reinstate the law. Then a Senate rematch race. Why a senator who lost his seat in a recall election wants his old job back. And a primary in a Milwaukee area Senate seat. Why does Senator Lena Taylor think she's being challenged by a fellow Democrat?
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. Wisconsin's right to work law will be back in front of a judge tomorrow morning in Dane County. 2 weeks ago, Dane County Judge William Faust declared the law unconstitutional. Right to work laws say that membership in a union and paying dues can't be a condition of employment. But 3 unions sued, saying the law is an illegal taking of their services, since unions must represent all employees in a workplace, even those who don't pay dues. The judge agreed. So here's where we stand today. The Wisconsin Department of Justice has asked Judge Faust to stay the ruling while the state appeals. That request for a stay will be heard tomorrow morning. And we're talking about that and more today with Attorney General Brad Schimel. Mr. Attorney General, good to have you back on the program.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
So what's at stake in tomorrow's hearing? Your request for a stay, why do you want it?
Well, because in the interim, there's going to be a lot of confusion. It's going to take some time to battle the case out in the merits in the appellate court. And in the interim, we need people to have guidance as to what exactly the rules are. And right now, there's a lot of confusion because there are questions about just how far does the Dane County judge's ruling reach? Does it reach just the 3 parties involved? And in terms of who it enjoins, it really only specifically enjoins certain representatives of the state of Wisconsin, the workforce, the work board, the governor, and I from enforcing it. It doesn't really do anything to any private employer at this point. Also, if someone took a similar challenge to another county, a judge in another county, actually another judge in Dane County, could come to a completely different ruling because the Dane County Circuit Court judge's order doesn't have any precedential authority over anyone else. So we really do need to get to the Court of Appeals to decide what the rules are in a way that has some binding authority.
So practically speaking, it is possible that some people who are currently not paying dues would have to pay dues if the judge does not grant your stay. Is that correct?
Well, you could see actions to try to compel that in the interim, and then you could end up with more litigation. This could start getting very costly for employers, for employees who want to challenge efforts to take dues money from them, and for the unions themselves. So it does make sense to put everything on hold. Let's find out what the rules are from a Court of Appeals. And to get a stay, you have to have 2 things. You have to be able to demonstrate that you have a substantial likelihood of winning on the merits. And given that we are one of 26 states that has right to work laws, many state courts, many federal courts, including the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Wisconsin at the federal level, all of those courts have concluded that state legislatures may make a policy decision to go right to work if they choose to. So we believe we have a strong chance of winning on the merits, and we can demonstrate that prong of the requirement for a stay. And the other is that there would be irreparable harm, and that irreparable harm might be the litigation and the confusion that exists in the interim.
So I hear you saying you're very confident that this right to work law, the Wisconsin right to work law, is structured in such a way that it will withstand further legal challenges.
We do believe that. We do believe strongly the law's on our side. The legislature, followed the rules in effect. They looked at what other states had done, and they did a similar thing.
Why didn't you go directly to the state Supreme Court? My understanding is you could have done that. Why didn't you do that? Some people think that would have been a court that might be perhaps even more receptive than going to the appeals court.
That is an option that isn't foreclosed at this point. All we've done so far is file the request for an emergency stay with the Dane County judge. That's where we start with that. We filed the notice of appeal in the 3rd District Court of Appeals. We still could, at some point, ask the District Court of Appeals to bypass this to the Supreme Court.
Let's talk a little bit about voter ID, because there have been some developments in that, I think, since the last time you and I talked. This notion that the 7th Circuit is saying, we think there are at least some people out there who might not be able to vote because they just have problems getting the ID. There are a number of scenarios of how that might occur. And they seem to leave the door open for having Wisconsin do something that the state of Indiana does, for example, with voter ID, having people sign an affidavit attesting to who they are. Is that likely to happen in this state? Is that likely to be the fix that we're going to see at some point?
I can't say how likely it is, but that is something we are discussing as attorneys for the state with our clients, the administration and the legislature, about making some changes. And it's possible we could see a change administratively in how the Department of Motor Vehicles goes about issuing photo IDs. And one of those options is to have an affidavit that a person fills out, and then they will get a kind of a temporary photo ID that they can use for those voting purposes. It'll be a piece of paper probably rather than a card, but that would enable them to vote. And it does address the concern about potential fraud, because we will now have a photograph of the person who's going in to vote. So it does satisfy the legislative intent of having a photograph ID for anyone who does vote. So we are exploring that. And I can tell you that in the conversations we've had with our clients, there is a strong desire to make sure that every eligible voter has the opportunity to vote, just that they do it with a photo ID. So it does make it easier as an attorney when you feel your client's doing the right thing, and I think they are. They're approaching this.
So help me again be clear on this. This could be done through an administrative adjustment, not through the legislative process? Right. You wouldn't have to take it back to the legislature?
Yes, because the legislation requires a photo ID. So there's got to be some form of photo involved here to do it without having a legislative change. But we could have a person sign an affidavit and then obtain a photo ID from DMV that would be satisfactory for voting. That's what we're exploring.
As the Attorney General, give me your assessment of how the April 5th primary election worked. I mean, were you concerned at anything you saw? Were you concerned at lines, for example, at places like Marquette or UW Green Bay? What's your take on that as the chief law enforcement officer in the state?
There certainly were lines, but we've had no one raise any concerns to us about any serious problems with that election. The lines were really a result of having enormous voter turnout, which I consider a great thing. I wish we could say this every election, that we had enormous voter turnout, but that's not usually true. And then a lot of people who try to register same day. They have the right to do that under our law, but anyone who goes out and registers to vote same day, they should expect to wait. That's a lengthy process. You're going to fill out paperwork. You're going to do things that are going to delay the process. So really the lines we saw were attributed to high turnout and people trying to register same day.
Quick final question. Any concerns about November, when the number of people going to the polls will be undoubtedly much greater than the number who went in April?
Well, my hope is that all of the municipal and county clerks are going to plan to have plenty of workers on site and plenty of ballots to have it all ready so we don't see any glitches.
Attorney General Brad Schimel is with us today. We appreciate your time, Mr. Attorney General. Good to have you back on the program. You bet. Next on Up Front, a senator who lost his seat in the 2011 Act 10 recalls wants it back. Does he think that times have now changed? And later, why is veteran Senator Lena Taylor facing a Democratic primary challenge? I'll be asking her when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.